Hello everyone, my name is Akali and I am a somatic therapist as well as an astrological counselor, and I also help people along their sexual journey, whether it's couples or individuals or whatever that may be. So what I want to talk about today is I want to talk about Sagittarius. I want to talk about the sexual superpower of Sagittarius. Um, Now the interesting thing about Sagittarius here is we the behavior of the sign, how Sagittarius, I guess, unfolds on its life path, going from immature to mature, from unconscious to conscious, from subjective to objective. Anyway, the as they're moving along this particular path, the planet Jupiter, it's just so omnipresent. And the thing is that people say, oh well, Jupiter's the super positive planet. Uh, It is, but every planet in the every planet in astrology has a negative aspect. And Jupiter, when it's unconscious, or Sagittarius, I'll say, when it's unconscious, is a sign that is quite chaotic. It's quite chaotic. It, Again, we have to look more at the specifics here of Sagittarius. So uh, the the chaos from Sagittarius is due to Jupiter's energy, which is always expanding, Sagittarius, which is ruled by fire, which means action generically, and it's mutable, meaning it's changeable. There's this sense that it's always kind of shifting directions. So add all that up, and what you have is this ever expanding activity. It's going here and then it's going there, it's going here, it's going there, all over the place. This is an absolute mess. This is total chaos. And this is my rising sign, so I can relate on some levels anyway. So the interesting thing here is that um, the the words I want to use, I'm trying to choose very specifically here. There's a couple words that I think apply to unconscious Jupiter. One is hypocrite. There's a lot of do as I say, not as I do kind of tendencies with Sagittarius, meaning they have all these very high-minded ideas, but they don't necessarily follow through on their own ideas. So this is very unconscious behavior when I guess Sagittarius is very immature. Now the other words would be lacking discipline. Let's see what else. I wrote a few down here. Irresponsible. Let's see. Totally just impractical. And again, because the ego is dominating here, it's totally ego dominant, and the ego is totally wrapped up in desire. This is desire. And again, because this is fire, so it's the desires, and this is also a masculine sign, quote unquote masculine or positive. The masculine energy, the positive charge, is driving these people all over the place in this direction and that direction, and this applies to their sex life as well. They're going to have this partner, then that partner, then this partner, then that partner, and they may have all these high-minded ideas about where this is supposed to be going, but they don't get there. They won't get there until they start to meditate, slow down, do some yoga, whatever it is. Now, the beautiful thing is that Sagittarius, I believe, is naturally geared to move towards those higher principles. Again, it's ruled by Jupiter. And Sagittarius is also, as I perceive it, what I consider, and I may be misusing this word, is the Hierophant. The Hierophant, as I understand it, is the one who brings heaven to earth. And that is very much how I perceive Sagittarius here. So the symbols associated with Sagittarius are also quite telling about their progression. And so immature Sagittarius is it's kind of the centaur, which is this animal horse hybrid thing. And this is an ancient symbol that's associated with the sign. And it has to do with this kind of man's nature, I guess human nature and animal nature being all intertwined into the same beast, and one will rule over the other. And it's not a battle so much as it is just total unconscious behavior. The battle from higher self to lower self occurred more in Scorpio, which is the previous sign. So in this particular case, it's more about, I guess, how do I direct this activity? Do I direct this activity towards something higher, or do I continue to behave chaotically and go slamming into things and creating a mess? And again, just being totally undisciplined about it. So let's talk about the evolution here. So the second stage of Sagittarius, moving from the unconscious and moving from all this like indiscriminate sex that possibly could happen here, is towards this objective, more objective reality, which happens when they slow down. They start to make choices about what they're doing and where they're going and how they're going to do it, et cetera, et cetera. So the the word I want to kind of look at here is that their purpose becomes more clear at this phase. And this is when Sagittarius, who every Sagittarian I know is very intuitive, if cultivated. If they're cultivated, there's a deep sense of intuition, but this intuition only comes, and like any of us who are on a spiritual path, which I assume many of you who are watching this video are, you'll know that the voice for intuition is very quiet. It's very subtle. And if you're constantly following every whim and every desire, you can't hear it. You can't honor it. So when Sagittarius slows down, a couple things happen. One is they become quite intelligent. They're gaining knowledge. They could have a real hunger for philosophy, for spirituality, for these sorts of, high-minded ideals, So, and again, this is Jupiter. Jupiter is always expanding them. And so Jupiter wants to expand you beyond the earth plane on some level. Not really beyond the earth plane, I shouldn't say that. It's more about the expansiveness of the ideas that are very much connected to the earth plane, because Jupiter is still a very personal planet on some levels. I guess you don't expand way beyond the earth plane until you get to sort of Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. They're sort of further out planets. But anyway, I digress. So the thing about Jupiter here is their purpose becomes very clear. It becomes the point. That's my purpose. Every Sagittarius person I'm aware of knows that this idea of purpose, what am I here to do in this life? And again, it's on the material plane that their expression is their interest. So Sagittarius to me is also a very spiritual sign, but it's interesting because the other very spiritual sign, when I tend to think of spirituality, the other sign I tend to think of is Pisces. Pisces is different though. It's a different spirituality. It has a different purpose. And when I get to Pisces in this series of videos, it'll make a little more sense. But in this particular case, it's about one's deeds and actions on the earth plane. It's how do I harmonize with my soul, which is my deeper aspect, which is the subconscious, which is very connected to my intuition. It is the soul's language is very much intuition. So once the Sagittarian can start to honor the intuition, how this, from a sexual angle, how this manifests is they become discriminating about the person that they're going to sleep with, about the relationships they have. They become very intuitive. Like sometimes there's almost like a mystical aspect to why they're with this person. Like, oh, is this mystical meeting or this magical happening? So their relationships, in terms of their sexual relationships, take on this new dynamic. And sex doesn't just become sex anymore, because the sex they were having before, this indiscriminate sex, it was like, scratching an itch. It was feeding a physical need, but it didn't have any sort of deeper truth to it. Now they start to see deeper truths in the sort of merger that is sex, this sort of mimicry of the creative process, of how everything comes into creation. That's essentially what sex is. It's a mimicry of God, infinity, the universe, or all creation, and how things come into manifestation. So with Sagittarius at this phase, they start to understand these ideas of union, which Tantra and which yoga always talk about. Yoga means to yoke, means to bring into union, to bring together the dualities. And so now Sagittarius starts to evolve to this non-dual kind of place. Their highest expression becomes one in which they're connected to their purpose. And their purpose is never about a goal. So anyone who's watching this video who is a Sagittarius and you think it's about a goal, it's not. It's about the sort of pathway to get to that goal, because it's about the accumulation of wisdom. And so wisdom requires a number of things. All this chaos that occurred early in Sagittarius, this sort of gaining of sort of selfish experiences, this self-centered, egotistical experience gathering, it's purposeful. And the purpose is you know what not to do, and you also realize, to some extent, what to do. So, and again, as they become more meditative, more objective, then they can start to harmonize with the soul, and they start to choose other things, and they gain other experiences. And again, this is a fire sign, so it's always about action, gaining experiences, and whatnot. So the formula is simple: knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. And so Sagittarius, on its highest expression, is incredibly wise, incredibly intuitive, incredibly focused on purpose, the soul's purpose, the deeper purpose. What am I, the spiritual being? And what am I, the expression of the soul? This is almost like their humanity dissolves at this point. So they move from the centaur, this like weird mixed beast kind of horseman, to becoming, on the second phase, when they become objective, there's a separation that occurs where they're the man riding a horse who's an archer. The next expression of Sagittarius, when they become single pointed, they move from self-discipline, which happens during the objectivity phase, into becoming the disciple, the zealot. And I don't mean that in a negative way. Every Sagittarius I know, including myself, is a bit of a zealot. We become very intense into the things that we are very high-minded about. You know what I mean? Those spiritual matters or philosophical matters or whatever it may be. So at the final phase, Sagittarius becomes not the rider, not the horse. They become the bow and the arrow itself, specifically the arrow. They become that. You see what I mean? So it's like your humanity completely dissolves and they become a manifestation of spirit. And how does this express sexually? I could see it going a number of different ways. I could see Sagittarians at this phase not even being interested in sex anymore. That's a possibility. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It just means they transcended that. And that's a big word here, is transcendence. They are now identifying with the soul of humanity. They're now identifying with the spirit which flows in all things. So they don't necessarily even have to have sex anymore at this point. However, if they do remain sexual, they will start to choose very specific partners driven by a deep sense of intuition, and that deep sense of intuition is going to tell them specifically the person they can move into a total and complete merger with. And that total deep sense of merger with this other human being, it's not, how should I say this? It's not experienced in a strictly physical way. They have access to a deep, deep sort of spiritual sensitivity. And so their sexual experiences could be otherworldly, could involve a lot of visions, could involve a sense of becoming one with the other person. And again, all the sort of I would say spiritual tantra book woo-woo cliches apply here. So with all that said, hopefully you've learned a little more about Sagittarius. I know I did when I was researching this. Even though my ascendant's in Sag, I was a bit clueless. So with all that said, hopefully you appreciate this video, and thank you for watching.